want to know?
Everything. Start at the beginning.
Two 2010 was another incredible year for BioWare. Mass Effect 2 had just come out and people loved it. It was praised yet again for its story and characters. Some even consider it better than the original.
I disagree!
But it was clear BioWare was 2 for 2 on one of their franchises, so there was little doubt that Dragon Age 2 would deliver. Then the game came out, and fans were like,
"What the hell is this?"
Dragon Age 2 received the complete opposite reception as Origins. While it received decent scores by critics, user score even today is down to a 4 on Metacritic. There were countless videos on why people hated this game, calling it the worst BioWare game at the time, and even naming it the catalyst. No, not you! Fuck off! That began BioWare's descent into the downward spiral. But there was another problem that BioWare was facing, something that was present even during Mass Effect 2. And I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about. It's a company that needs no introduction. EA, the bane of everyone's existence, a blight on the gaming community for years now, and BioWare is one of their most famous victims. Many people like to ignore it with Mass Effect 2, but this is where BioWare's RPG mechanics really started to dwindle. Compare the main story to Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2, and you'll start to see that the player choice really starts to loosen. The games become less about making decisions in the world influencing companions and the galaxy as a whole, and more about being an action game. And that design would bleed into Dragon Age 2. Right from the beginning of the game, problems start to arrive. Remember back in Origins how you had a choice between 3 different races and 6 different backgrounds? Well, this game decreases it by having you restricted to a human character, and while you can alter their sex and class, they will always be known as Hawk, which is suspiciously similar to another BioWare protagonist. Now, this isn't all bad. There are still changes to the story throughout the game depending on the class you pick, the most prominent one being the sibling you spend the most time with. With that being said, let's go through the opening. So in this game, you play as the son or daughter of the Hawk family who are trying to escape from the darkspawn that attacks your village. Your brother or sister dies defending your mother from a monster, and you quickly get onto a boat with Aveline Valen, and you sail to the city of Kirkwall. Oh right, I almost forgot. So the story is being told by a dwarf named Varric, and he's being interrogated by this woman named Cassandra. And I immediately get jealous because I wish she was interrogating me. What was I talking about? Oh, right. So Varric is telling the story from past events, how he met Hawk, and what they went through. So anyway, you get to Kirkwall, and this is where the entire game takes place. There's a few moments where you go to different places, but for a majority of the game, you remain in Kirkwall. Where Origins had you go to multiple locations throughout the game, Dragon Age 2 is set in the same place over the course of a couple years. Each act is a different period of time for the city and our heroes. Now this is actually a pretty cool idea. In theory. So for those of you who don't know, this game was in development for 9 fucking months, good lord. And unfortunately, BioWare isn't as good at working under pressure as Obsidian is. So it's pretty clear that this game is unfinished. That's why you spend a majority of the game in one location as opposed to the different areas you can travel to in Origins. Now, this wouldn't be a problem if the area changed throughout the time skips. But it really doesn't. Other than where Hawk's home is, the landscape stays pretty much the same. So as you can imagine, this was a downgrade to a lot of people because this is the sequel to Origins. And this disappointment would continue with the combat. Now Origins combat was decent. Like I said, I'm personally have never been a fan of it, but it worked for this type of game because it allows flexibility with the classes and it makes the game a lot more tactical with companions. Now Dragon Age 2 has a similar combat system, and the main thing that they focus on is making the combat a lot more fast-paced and aggressive. So that means that a big part of this game is going from one enemy to the other, chaining a bunch of attacks and abilities into each other. The animations are a lot faster from the characters. They dash and jump around and move way faster, which makes the fights pretty cool and entertaining. And it does make the fights a little bit more intense, as it's just a giant mosh pit of you and your companions just beating the hell out of everybody. However, so remember when I said that the combat in Origins can get annoying in dungeon crawls because there are a lot of enemies and it gets tedious? Well, the plus side is that they were at the very least in groups. So, you kill a group of enemies, then after a fight you can heal, recover mana, whatever, and then go on to the next fight. In Dragon Age 2, every single fight is wave-based. So whenever you kill a batch of dickheads, another batch will come in and try to kill you. Followed by another. And possibly another after that. It is so fucking aggravating. Dragon Age 2 is also by far the hardest game in the series. I do not recommend playing this game on hard. Origins was annoying enough as it is, and you don't deserve to stress yourself out even more. What the fuck? You just fucking backstabbed the shit out of me! Drink the fucking potion! Why aren't you drinking the fucking potion? Oh my fucking god! Some advice I will give you when it comes to combat: if you see a mage, murder it. Murder it as fast as you fucking can, because they will fuck you up with AoE spells and ruin your entire goddamn day. Also, take Anders with you, like, everywhere. Not only are his spells really good, but he's also a really good healer, and he will save your ass when it matters. Which is really ironic that I say that, but we'll get to that later. Also, customization got butchered as well. I didn't talk about it in Origins, but that game had terrible inventory management. You could barely carry shit. Now, the plus side was that you were actually able to fully customize your companions. So whenever you found a cool armor piece, you could be sure that it was going to be used by at least someone in the group. Dragon Age 2, on the other hand, now, inventory management is better, and the fact that you stay in the same city does help because you always have a place to sell stuff. But you cannot change your companion's armor, only their weapons. And to be honest, I really don't like this, because every time I find an armor set, instead of giving it to someone to make them better, it goes straight to the shop. And speaking of the shop, gold is pretty worthless in this game. In Origins, it took a while to make money, and the gear that was available in the shop was pretty high quality stuff, and when you had enough to purchase it, it felt good. Especially when it was a specific weapon or armor piece that was exclusive to a shop in an area. But in 2, you're gonna find a lot of the cool stuff from just playing the game and looting. Honestly, it feels like a lot of stuff is just being given to me. It's kinda ridiculous. The only thing I remember buying is just some stuff in the beginning of the game and stocking up on potions. No, I don't buy runes. I'm not good with them, okay? Leave me alone. But anyway, let's move on. So you're in Kirkwall. Hawke and their family meet up with their uncle, and you're down in the dumps, and the story follows them as they go from poor peasant to wealthy noble to the champion of Kirkwall. That's the main gist of the story. It follows many stories and events that happen around Kirkwall. So Hawke and their harem go around doing ludicrous shit around town. Now, I actually like this. I feel like I'm becoming a local of the city of Kirkwall, and I personally think that this game does a decent job at conveying this feeling of unfamiliarity with the environment in Act 1. But the thing about the main quest is that there's a lack of an overall theme to it. So, Origins had an overarching plot of the Blight and Darkspawn coming to kill everybody, while Loghain was corrupting the kingdom. And each area you went to had its own plot, but it all ultimately related to the goal of getting people on your side to fight the Darkspawn. Dragon Age 2 doesn't really have this. It's way more of a side story where the focus is way more on the companions and building on the world. Well, at least part of it. It doesn't tell this story effectively, at least I don't think so. It does at first, but it kind of falls off towards the end. It's not like it's a story about how greed corrupts and destroys the people around you. If anything, it just tells about how Hawke became the champion of Kirkwall. It's a very shallow story compared to Origins. It actually reminds me a lot of the story of Mass Effect 2, because the story in that game is a sidetrack of the other main games, and exists to build up the world and grow on the characters. But this was fine for Mass Effect because players were invested and wanted more from this galaxy. And like I mentioned before, Mass Effect had the same characters that connected the trilogy together. Now, Dragon Age 2 does make a good move to move on from the Darkspawn and the Grey Wardens, even though they still do have a presence. And I think this is a good call, as this is a big world and it deserves to have new concepts and regions to introduce. However, this is also where BioWare wanted to make the series into a connected saga. It mainly comes in Act 3, and we'll talk about that shortly. The RPG mechanics also took a nosedive in variety. In Origins, you had a wide variety of dialogue options to choose from, and you weren't being bogged down by a morality system. And once again, Dragon Age 2 copies a little too much from Mass Effect and implements their own morality system into the game. Now, this isn't as extreme as the Paragon Renegade bars, but it's a similar concept. Basically, you have 3 choices with Hawke's personality: diplomatic and helpful, humorous and charming, aggressive and direct. And you're encouraged to commit to one of these, as they will also affect how Hawke will respond without the player's input as well. And it's honestly kind of infuriating to deal with, because now instead of making decisions in the moment and choosing what you think is right, you're now picking between colors. Now, I'm not against morality systems. There are games that implement them in a way that work. As annoying as they were in Mass Effect, players could at least have the consistency of, this person is cool, be nice to them. This person is mean, punch them. Now, to give credit where credit is due, the game is not absent of choice. In fact, major choices in this game are where it really shines, and there are still consequences to different outcomes throughout the story. One of the infamous ones in the game is the fate of Hawke's surviving sibling in the Deep Roads, but I'll get to that once we talk about Act 1. Here we can see that the complexity of the previous game are still present, even if most of the game is steering away from it. While it is undoubtedly less varied than Origins, there are still elements that encourage multiple playthroughs. And honestly, I would say that this game is a lot more replayable than Inquisition. This game really highlights the importance of the people you take in your party, as there are now dialogue options that will appear where you can ask a particular member advice on what they would do, or even let them take the lead, which is pretty damn cool. Now, this wasn't absent in Origins. There were plenty of times where companions would chime in and express their opinions on what they think you should do. But in the end, the decisions were always left up to you. And it would affect your approval rating with them, depending on what you ended up picking. This is more highlighted in Dragon Age 2. And while I do prefer the Origins companions, this makes the parties seem much more independent. With that praise being said, something we need to talk about is a very divisive problem that doesn't just come with this game, but a lot of modern games now. Voiced protagonists. Whenever this topic comes up, there's always a lot of conflicting opinions on the matter. There are those who think voice protagonists have no place in RPGs and feel as though that by default, they limit a decision in a conversation. And honestly, it is fair to see why they think that. Mass Effect was a great game, but it ruined a lot of future RPGs, because after that, every game had to be Mass Effect. Every game needed a dialogue wheel and a voice protagonist. It caused games like Fallout 4 to stray away from the original concepts, Assassin's Creed to become even more exhausting, and hell, even BioWare copied their own design into their own games. In both KOTORs and Origins, the player's dialogue is only read, not heard. And in this sense, it made players feel more connected to their characters because they were able to imagine their own voices in the situation they were in. Now, I'm not saying that voice protagonists are a bad thing or shouldn't exist. In Mass Effect, while it did popularize the concept, it wasn't the first RPG to have a voice protagonist. The Witcher did it around the same time, and Deus Ex did it way before, and people loved those games. And hell, Hawke isn't even that bad. Both the voice actors do great jobs with their performances.
Someday I'd like to go 1 week without meeting an insane mage. Just 1 week.
Chances are we won't find anything but even more darkspawn. And rubble. Maybe bones?
But this is where the identity of Dragon Age starts to get lost with time. While the world was intriguing and the history was interesting, it's losing its touch on what made Origins so good. Origins was meant to connect new and old players, create a simple plot with simple mechanics, but can still be enjoyed by veterans of the genre. So if someone wanted to get invested in the world and feel like a scrappy adventurer with their ragtag group of friends, they could do that. But if they want a fun game to piss off everyone and have a little fun being the bad guy, they could do that too. Dragon Age 2, on the other hand, feels even more streamlined. It's trying too hard to keep the player's attention with action rather than a combination of action and story. But to get into that, we actually have to go through the story. Act 1 starts as I said before. You arrive at Kirkwall, your family is slumming in Lowtown, and your mother talks about how the family should have the right to the Amel Manor. But you need money to reclaim it. So, Varric gives you an offer because he has a special ability called Main Character Detection, and he helps you make your money and find a way to join the Deep Roads exhibition that his brother is running. So this act is pretty simple. Make some money and make some friends. And I actually like it. I like how all the characters have a different hangout spot throughout the city. I mean, realistically, it's the same as the companions standing in camp and waiting for you to come talk to them, but this at the very least gives it more believability. This act also foreshadows plot lines and conflicts that will begin to arise in future acts as well. You meet the Kunari, and you see some conflicts between mages and Templars. So overall, this first act introduces everything pretty well. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a bit of pacing issues, and the game throws a lot in your face at once, but to get enough information to the player, I've seen worse. So anyway, you meet your harem, and you make some money, and get into the Deep Roads exhibition. Gee, thanks Bartrand, you seem like a trustworthy person. Yeah, he betrays you. He locks you in and runs off with a crystal that totally isn't cursed, but you manage to fight your way through and find your own treasure that the demon tells you not to take. Wait, what? Yeah, you fight a rock demon and steal his treasure. Get fucked, nerd. But then you come back home and find out that your sister is going away to the Mage's Circle. Well, at least I did. So this is where the fate of your sibling comes in the Deep Roads exhibition. Take them with you, they die. Leave them at home, they leave to the Circle or the Templars. Take them with you and bring Anders, they become a Grey Warden. This to me shows that the people making this game did care, and they wanted to make something that at least matched Origins in quality, but they just didn't have the time or resources to do it. But regardless of what happens, your sibling is gone. Which sucks in my case, because I was expecting her to be a really powerful elemental mage, and now I don't have that. God damn it, BioWare. But from this, Hawke moves up from their position in Kirkwall and starts living in Hightown. Act 2 starts a few years later. Hawke gets called by the Viscount. Tensions are growing with the Kunari and people are getting scared. The Alashok, that's this guy, is getting really pissy about something. So Hawke is tasked to keep the peace. So you go talk to them and ask what's wrong, and eventually they'll tell you they can't leave because there's an artifact that they are looking for, and they can't leave without it. While you work on that, you go and check on your buddies. And I really like how they show this. I like seeing interactions between other companions because it shows that they are growing as well, either as allies or as enemies. So, a lot of crazy shit happens in Act 2. You find out what a Kunari mage looks like, and how they treat their mages. Now, you're probably wondering, didn't the Kunari look like this? Why the fuck do they look like this now? And yeah, it's pretty fucking jarring. But that's not the only thing that changed. So our only window into the Kunari in the first game was Sten, and when you talked to him, he had a very reserved personality, and would rarely talk about himself or his people. But when you finally got through to him, he would explain that Kunari have a very survivalistic and accepting mindset. He talks about how each member of their race accepts their role regardless of what it is. Now, when we first meet Sten, he is locked up after the murder of a family, and he did this because he was freaking out at the fact that he was in a new place and surrounded by a race of people that he's not familiar with. While what he did was terrible, I can at least see the reason why he did it when we look at the circumstances that he found himself in. The Kunari in this game are roided out murdering douchebags. So this quest with the Kunari mage, you're tasked with escorting him out of the city. You do that, and a bunch of guys from his tribe will ambush you and demand that you release him. And the mage says that he is fine with being sentenced to death at this point. So I agreed and let them take him. And then they try to kill us anyway. Like, what the fuck? Oh, and the same shit happens if you resist. You can fight them first and then the mage will still kill himself. So if Act 1 was a good start with the choices, Act 2 is starting to slip. And yeah, you do learn that there are a cult of people that are trying to paint the Kunari in a worse light because they don't like them or whatever, but with how these fuckers act, it's not hard to make them look bad. And then in the climax of this act, you find out that the artifact that was stolen from them was actually taken by Isabella, one of your companions. And then the Airshock just unleashes a fucking murder spree on the city and kills a Viscount. Now I get it, someone stole your shit and you want it back. But does that make all of this okay? And on top of it, he also talks shit on humans and other species for being oppressive assholes and judging them too harshly. Like, fucking dude.
Your kind judge and oppress us because of their presumed assumption of our violent nature.
My brother in Andraste, you just murdered the fucking mailman! So the climax of this act is the Kunari are pissy about Isabella taking their shit. So they attack Kirkwall and fuck everything up. Isabella takes the artifact and bails, so it seems like the only option we have is to fight these fuckers. It is here that we are introduced to the Captain of the Templars and the Grand Enchanter. Not only do they come to help, they also foreshadow what Act 3 will be about. Oh, also Alistair makes an appearance here as well. Well, depending on what happens to him in Origins, he'll make an appearance. He doesn't really add anything, he's just kind of a little cameo. Hi, Alistair. But you confront the air shock and everything leads to a grand duel. But this is when Isabella comes back and returns the artifact to them. And this leads to another big decision. They will leave, but they ask to take Isabella with them. They say that she must be punished for what she did. And if you agree, the attack on Kirkwall will end. So your choice is to give them Isabella, fight them all, or challenge the air shock to a duel. Now, as hollow as this might be, I do like that this is a choice. Now, it's very obviously a good choice and a bad choice, but at least it's a choice to be made. But personally, this choice is a no-brainer. Even if you don't like Isabella, and she did steal something from them, this fucker does not deserve to run free. So you kill him, and Hawke is now the champion of Kirkwall. Oh, I almost forgot, their mom dies in this act as well. She gets kidnapped by a serial killer, and it's actually a really grim and sad moment in the game. R.I.P. Hawke's mom. And now we're on to Act 3, the conflict between the mages and the Templars. But before that, let's take a moment to talk about the companions. The companions in this game are okay. I've definitely seen worse. It's not like Andromeda companions or anything like that, but they don't really hit that high bar that BioWare is known for. Well, except for one. Varric is an incredibly charismatic and likable character. I like how he's the narrator, and the game keeps on cutting back to him being interrogated by Cassandra. Kinda like how Persona 5 kept on cutting back to Joker being interrogated by Sai. Speaking of which, both these games show a characters being interrogated by very dominant women. Huh. Anyway, there's also Avril Lavigne. She's the first one that helps you when you first arrive on Kirkwall, and she very quickly becomes a Knight's Guard. Very generic, but not a bad character. She's okay. You also help her get laid. Meryl, whose entire purpose is to be the cute, quirky elf girl for the people who want to fuck a girl elf in Origins. Fenris, who kins himself with Shadow the Hedgehog. Isabella, where a BioWare employee went up to Riot and said, "Hey, can I copy your character? Fine, just make sure you change it up." And so they made their own Miss Fortune without the cool backstory and drip that Miss Fortune has. Seriously, they literally made a busty pirate with huge tits and said, "Well, good enough." And yes, I know she was in Origins. That doesn't make her any more bland. There's also this guy whose name I don't remember. One of your siblings, depending on which class you picked. Pick the martial, your mage sister survives. Pick the mage, your warrior brother lives. And then there's Anders. And oh boy, let's talk about Anders. He was actually a character you met in Awakening. He's a mage that has the soul of a demon trapped inside of him that will take over his body every now and then. So Anders' whole deal is that he believes that mages have been getting disrespected for far too long, and it's time to push back. So a detail that I really like is that, in my case, my Grey Warden was a mage, and he'll occasionally bring up how a mage saved everyone from the Blight, which is a nice little detail that makes the setting really come more alive. Anyway, Anders is honestly one of the better characters in this game. He makes a lot of really good points and has a very understandable motivation. Because he's right. The Templars are being dicks. I mean, they have their reasons, but it's time to push back and make some real changes to the mage's circle. And stop this abuse— Oh my god, he just bombed the fucking church! Yeah, let's talk about Act 3. So, Act 3. By far the most interesting and dumbest part of this game. So a running theme that has been going throughout the acts is the consistent beef between mages and Templars. It's been a running theme since the first game, and both sides have their reasons. Mages have insane power that must be controlled, and with their connection to the Fade, they're constantly at risk of resorting to blood magic or becoming a demon. However, the consistent strictness of the Templars leads them to misjudge many mages, and oppress and abuse the ones that are innocent. So throughout this act, you are tasked with helping the Circle and the Templars, and throughout it, there are some options that will pop up that allow you to sabotage one group if you wish. But this all leads to a final showdown where they both have had enough of each other. and Hawk, being the champion of Kirkwall, is forced to pick a side and stop this conflict one way or another. And as all this is happening, Anders steps forward and gives some choice words to both of them, and then he summons a fucking laser and blows up the Chantry! Now, I get it. He wants to do this Hail Mary attack to inspire the mages and show that they will not be silenced. And he is hoping to become a martyr to inspire other mages to revolt with him. But I don't think this is a very good way to go about it. If anything, this is going to make the Templars believe their accusations more, and the mages even more fearful for their lives. It also makes Anders a huge fucking hypocrite, because one of the main banters he has in this game is with Meryl, where he berates her for using blood magic, and then he goes and does this shit. Like, dude, you have no room to talk. Then this leads to the decision of Anders' fate. And personally, the only decision that feels right is for him to pay for what he did. Maybe he'll be a martyr to some, but to most, he'll be an example. Moving on, you get the final decision to join either the Captain Templar or the Grand Enchanter. Depending on your relationship with your companions, there is a chance they will leave you here. If your sibling is still alive, and they have not become a Grey Warden, they will pick a side as well. But regardless of what you choose, this leads to a skirmish between the opposing forces, and both the leaders resort to desperate measures. The Enchanter falls to blood magic, and the Captain uses the Cursed Blade, made from the crystal that Bartrand stole in the first act. You defeat both of them, ending the conflict in Kirkwall, and Hawk and their gang leave the city. Now we come back to the present. The story that Varric was telling Cassandra is now complete, and the council meeting between the mages and Templars will be taking place soon. Liliana and Cassandra talk about how Hawk is nowhere to be found, just like the Grey Warden. At least in my case. My warden went to a portal with a goth GF, leave him alone. And with that, we are left with a cliffhanger ending that leads directly into Dragon Age Inquisition. This game is unremarkably bad. The combat sucks, the characters are stupid, and the story is dumb. And yet, I still love it. There's a level of charm in this game that I can't help but enjoy. And you know what? I take back what I said. Yeah, there's dumb characters, but people like Varric are welcome additions. Also, I gotta say, the art direction in this game is a step above Origins, and remains to be my favorite looking game out of the trilogy. There were some good designs in Origins, but you very quickly notice a large amount of reused assets. The big one being Alistair's hairstyle. There are a lot of NPCs that have the same repeating hairstyle. But in 2, the character designs for the main characters look stellar. Just look at Flemeth. Here's how she looks in Origins. A very plain old woman in robe type of shit. Someone that you wouldn't look twice at. Now look at her in Dragon Age 2. She looks fucking cool. She looks like a Mortal Kombat character. The armor design looks great in this game as well. There were some great medieval designs in Origins, but the armor continued to get better in the second game, especially the mage's robes. Anders looks sick, and say what you will about Hawk, but they look great. Hell, I like the female Hawk design so much that I even used it as inspiration for my OC. And you know what? Yeah, these companions are dumb, but they remind me a lot of a typical D&D party. The loud dwarf with high charisma, the edgy elf with a tragic past, the horny bisexual who wants to fuck everything, the mage that's secretly a homicidal maniac. Everyone has seen these archetypes before, and I can't help but love it. Now, don't get me wrong, this doesn't hold a candle to Origins, but it still feels good to beat this game. It's funny in a way. This game at the time of its release was considered a disaster, and for the longest time it was known as the worst BioWare game. But you look at it now, it honestly looks way better compared to these games. In the end, Dragon Age 2 feels more BioWare. While this is where Dragon Age started to abandon its own identity, it still kept BioWare's identity within them, which is something that I unfortunately can't say about the next game on this list. So, this one took a while. mainly just because there was a lot going on at the time. But I am happy that I got it out, and to be honest, I think I'm going to take a break from Dragon Age for right now. As much as I love making videos about this series, I am really not looking forward to playing Inquisition, so I think I'm going to take a break just so I don't get burned out on the series. However, I will say I am looking forward to making that video. But for the next video coming out, we're going to go back to something a little bit more familiar. Cheez-Its or goldfish? Cheez-Its. Especially the spicy ones. What's a genre you can never get into when it comes to games? Survival games. There's some exceptions like Minecraft and The Forest, but I never really enjoyed any of them. Games like DayZ, Rust, and Valheim tend to lose my interest pretty quickly. It's also just such a time crunch to get so much stuff that you're most likely going to lose, and I just never saw the appeal of it. What video game developer do you respect the most? I'm not too big on their games, but I would say Larian Studios. It takes a lot to put so much into one game that's not even in full release yet. Especially for a genre of games that have not been in the mainstream for a long time.